weapon will prosper. No enemy triumph. He will not overcome. He can't scale these walls. Injustice will not win. Hell's gates will not prevail. Not on my time. Not on my watch. I am a watchman, and I take my place. As I wait, I will keep the faith. 'Cause I am a watchman, and I stand my ground. But if I never see it, I will stay the course. I will run the race, I will fight the fight, and I will keep the faith. I keep my eyes fixed on you.
Well, welcome everybody to our noon live stream here from Christian Center Shreveport. Pastor Tim Carscadden here with Zach Carscadden next to me here. We're in the studio here at the ministry. We're going to be building the studio out pretty soon. It'll be a little bit different. This is where we're starting now. So you'll see us here rather than my little private place I was in my home. This is going to just kind of work better for us here, working together. We'll still have our guests. We'll still do a lot of things that we've done in the past. But in this season that we're in, we obviously want to be focused, and we want you, the intercessor, you, the warrior, you, the watchman. I think that's what our intro song really speaks to as our call. The Shamar anointing, the watchman who watches over Israel, never rest. The Lord doesn't rest. I think that's true. The Lord wakes people up day and night to pray for Israel, pray for the peace of Jerusalem. We're doing that right now, obviously, with the potential war. We titled today about the dire straits that we're in. We'll use that term because that's a biblical term given in the book of Lamentations. I'll read it here in just a second because it's a time in history. We call the dire straits a 3-week period between the 17th of Tammuz, the 4th month of the biblical month, and the 9th of Av, which is the 5th month, which we're coming into. Today is the launching of the 5th month. So if you listen to my podcast today, I gave just a dissertation a little bit about what has happened this month in history and what is going to happen in the season ahead, because the Lord's given us insight as far as that's concerned. We are in those dire straits. A dire strait is a dangerous place. And that's a nautical term for shippers and so forth. They go through these areas where they have the reef and so forth. Their boats, if they don't go through properly, they're going to be grounded. They'll be stuck. They'll sink. And so it's a very critical time. And that's where we want to be, in that place where that we are in those dire straits, and we got to walk this out. Another term for that is the fast of the 4th month. And we'll read the scripture for that. And then the season of basilisk, which is a word, Leviathan, and we've talked about that before. It's a word Bob Jones gave us many years ago that we've been walking in. And I just want to give you a context for that. But let me read out of Lamentations. I know that's not one of your favorite books to read. I think it was Jeremiah going through his crisis, and he was just lamenting of all the battles that he was going through, which I think we all are at this time. But one translation that uses dire straits, I think it's the King James, but it says, Judah has gone into captivity under affliction and hard servitude. She dwells among the nations. She finds no rest. All her persecutors overtake her in dire straits. And so fear is very strong in this season among the Jewish people and among the people of Israel, because this is the time they lost both their temples. On the 9th of Av. It's also the diaspora, when they were kicked out of England, they were kicked out of Spain. On this day, on the 9th of Av, which would be next week, I think it's going to be on Monday, the 12th, 13th, right around there. And we'll talk about that as we go along here. So this is a time where Israel has a history of being in distress. It says, all her pursuers have overtaken her in the midst of her distress. And that has happened to her prophetically. The scripture said those things would happen, but it actually happened on these dates. And we teach on the feast and how specific things happen on the feast. And this is one of those days that specific things happen on this. And here we are with the threat of war from Iran and its proxies around Israel. They have actually, I read in Jerusalem Post, I think I posted it on the pipeline report page, that they are even contemplating attacking on that day just to be just to put it to Israel that it's happened on the same day they lost your temple, you lost all these things. Well, we're going to attack you on this day. Now, this is where today we want to activate you on intercession on how to pray accordingly in these events. In Zechariah 8:17, it says, "Thus says the Lord, the fast of the fourth month, the fast of the fifth, the fast of the seventh, the fast of the 10th, each one of the Jewish feast fast are memorial times, causing them to examine themselves so they would not repeat the sins of the past." And so we're in the fast. Jewish people are fasting right now because of this dire strait that we're in right now. I'll give you an example. I've shared it before, but it's a good example. This many years ago, I think it was the late 90s, maybe early 2000s, Bob Jones gave us a word here for America. And he saw this dire strait season, and we had been doing some really bad things at that time with Israel, back to two-state solution, giving up land for peace, etc., during the Bush administration. And he had a warning. The Lord showed him in a vision that this basilisk spirit, Leviathan is another term for it, was going to come against the southeast part of America, the southeast states, and I don't name them all, but there's many of them. So he called together a special conference in Florida, Jacksonville, I think it was, and for all of us, and we were invited from the southeast, all the people that were really in the apostolic prophetic intercessory movement were invited to come to this conference to pray against this thing that was coming against America. So Susan and I, my wife, we went as representatives for Louisiana. I think we were the only reps there from Louisiana, but most everybody came from all the different states. And in that season, the only people that didn't come to the conference were from North Carolina. They were invited, but they just didn't make it. And so we prayed against it. Well, when the dire straits came, those 3 weeks happened, and ninth of Av happened. There were 3 hurricanes that came and hit the southeast, and it hit North Carolina. Didn't hit anybody else. So I think that's something that we see here, that we can avert this stuff in prayer. We can break this stuff, and that's why we're here, is to inform you of the hour we're in, the dire straits that we're going through right now. Israel is really under the gun right now. We felt today, I gave a word yesterday, I prophetically felt last week that today was a breach, and there's a breach that the enemy was going to breach a wall and begin to open up an opportunity to attack Israel. And I didn't think it was all going to happen today, but I just felt like the breach was going to occur. And we've already seen rockets come from from the north, from Lebanon toward Israel. And Israel's preemptively striking all around the region, Syria, Iraq area, trying to stop the weapon flow to Hezbollah from Iran. We know now, the news reports that Russia is landing weapons planes in Tehran, unloading weapons there. We also are landing in Kuwait, where we're dropping weapons there. We are bringing in ships, air forces coming to the region. Because there's an anticipation of what happened in April when Iran sent over 300 plus ordinances and the coalition shot them down. I'm being honest with you. I feel in the spirit some of them are going to probably get through this time. I'm praying for the safety of Israel and Jerusalem, especially remind everybody Rick Joyner did have a dream many years ago, and in his dream he saw some type of nuclear device go off in Israel. He said the Lord showed him in the dream it would come on the most wicked city in Israel. Now, we don't know who that is. Most think it's Tel Aviv. We don't know because the dream didn't tell him that. It just said one of the most wicked cities in Israel. We don't know all that goes on in Israel. Maybe there's some witchcraft in some cities we don't know about, etc. So Kabbalah, I know, is high level in the South. So it could be something like that as well. We don't know where that's going to be, but it's a scary thought to think that. but we have to pray for protection. We have to pray over Israel right now. And that's our goal here today. Netanyahu and Zach, I'll bring Zach in here now. He's in a crisis here. He's in a political war with the left in his own country. And look, many Jews do not like Netanyahu. It's like America. They're fully partisan in the country, like we are here. Right now, the polls show that he is the most. He carries the most weight right now in the polls. I had a dream, and a lot of my Jewish friends and the Messianic friends don't agree with me on this, but that God has raised him up for this hour. He's like a Churchill during World War II. It was for Britain. Netanyahu is being used for this. Some Jewish people believe that he's just doing this war so he doesn't get indicted and doesn't go to prison, things like that. That's just hearsay. We need to hear what the Lord's saying on this issue, and I believe we are supposed to pray for this man. We're supposed to pray that he has wisdom in this hour. He does have prophetic voices from the Christian community that speak into his life, and he does listen to them, and he does receive their input. So, having said that, Zach, what's your analysis? What are you seeing in Israel with this battle that we're going through right now? Go ahead and speak to that.
Well, as we see, hopefully you guys have seen what's happened over the weekend. The reports out of, and this has a huge effect on what will happen in the days ahead as we talk about the dire straits. Because what has happened, whether Israel was involved or wasn't involved, there's possibility of a stronger attack upon them, Israel, from Iran. And what this means for Israel is all hands on deck type of thing. We're seeing that, and we'll talk about that later here in a second. But we have not only those on the left who obviously have an agenda to remove Netanyahu, but then you have those on the right who are mad that he's not being more forceful and more eye for an eye. And so that's kind of a big push within him. And we are talking about this before. This is a moment where, okay, we both sides have their ideals of what they would want, but we have to realize that there's ideals and then there's the reality of what Netanyahu's living in. And he's living in a government that still has opponents of his within the government, and specifically the military. And so, being that he has people who, unfortunately, because of their lack of security concerns before October 7th, they're still in office. They're still leading. The same ones who made the decisions to not shoot up the warnings that were there that everybody knew about, to not pay attention to the radios that were there. They made the choice, for whatever the reason is, to allow that attack to happen and start this war. And everybody wants to, especially here in America and on the right and in Israel, say, well, Israel, Netanyahu, his administration allowed it so he can stay in power, et cetera, et cetera. That's kind of hard to see when you look at the reality of what's happening, what's going on within the administration, within Netanyahu in Israel. And so it's kind of a big fight there. And as prayer warriors and intercessors, here's what we have to come to the conclusion and understand is that, okay, we have our ideal, but we can't let our ideal frustrate us enough to make us become angry and get out of the timeline of the Lord. Is whether we would like Netanyahu to do something else, whether he's not doing what we believe him to do, and more so for Netanyahu, whether he is doing something or isn't doing something that whether he believes there are people around him, to not let the frustration build and get them out of that place of peace, that potting soil, the peace that passes all understanding, so that he can make the right moves to, one, defend Israel, but then two, thwart off not only attacks currently, but in the future, to be able to have a somewhat of a peaceful land there in the Middle East. And so we have to really be sure to be mindful of not pushing our own agenda when we pray, then opening up, back door spiritually for an attack on ourselves, but pray that Netanyahu and his administration and those around him would take guidance from the Holy Spirit and look at what's happening in Rafah. I mean, they're finding the whole world saying, don't go into Rafah. You shouldn't do it. We're going to try to stop you. They're finding tunnels where commercial moving trucks could get inside of and carry weapons from Egypt into the heartland of Gaza and even up into some Israel suburbs. And so This is very, very alarming. This is what Netanyahu is dealing with. And there are those on the right who maybe they're right a little bit. Netanyahu should be a little bit more forceful, but he also has to play the political game and navigate. So he's got the military telling him to do one thing, the politicians telling him to do one thing, the Orthodox saying this, the seculars saying this, everybody's saying something. And so he's having to navigate all that. So think about the weight and the pressure that's on his shoulders, not only on our president's shoulders, and more so the administration and how they're handling it. So there's a lot at play here, and this is kind of the landscape of what we're dealing with, and this is why we need to pray now and in this season and the days ahead.
Yeah, why don't you see, Zach, if you can find a picture of that tunnel? I think it's really important that you all see that. Can you pull up the page I got there, Eric, from Fox News there? This is Iran issues a chilling threat against Israel and Hezbollah. Drones preview for a larger attack here. And what they're saying is, it says Iran says Israel is digging its own grave in the situation. And so they sent a drone attack today, Monday. Obviously, they're 7 hours or 8 hours ahead of us, as the country embraces for an attack. So they already sent the drone attack. That's why I felt today was a breach. There'd be a break-in. So these tensions are getting really high with the proxies, et cetera. The article goes on to say, and the response is to the assassinations that Israel's done. Now, first of all, Israel doesn't care about these people. I mean, Iran doesn't care about these people. They're just using it as an opportunity to attack Israel. So we see that don't play into that game that, oh, they're mad because one of their guys got killed. That's really not what they're into. And now they're not sure if Israel was really behind it or did all of it. It's very possible that there was an infiltration within the IRC, which within their own organization, that took a role in this as well. So, Lord, if that came out, they'd really be in a bind, because it would just show the weakness within their own regime, which we believe. So the article goes on to say that Israel is the cradle of terrorism, is what Iran says, and has been created out of a killing and murder. This is the lies that are being perpetrated by Iran and others. So you can slide out of that. So this is where we are right now. The threats are we call the sword rattling is going on. The war drums are being beaten in this moment because they're trying to put fear. Like, this thing is all about fear. This is trying to intimidate. Terrorism is rooted in fear. Terror, trying to put terror in the hearts of the people. Can you imagine the people in Israel? I know this, when the bombs were going off in some of the intifadas, when Gaza was bombing Israel in the past. I was there in the land. I met with some of the social workers who were having to work with children that were having to deal with, constantly going into bomb shelters. And many times they had a hotline where the children would just call in the hotline and just say, would you please sing to me? Would you please talk to me? Just because the fear was terrorizing them because of the constant barrage of rockets coming from Gaza. So the long-term effects on this terrorism is going to affect Israel for many years. So Zach's got a picture here of what this tunnel is down in Rafah. This is a very important issue for us to be cognizant of, because it has a lot to do with the ceasefire and the hostage release. Go ahead.
So here we see, I pulled this JNS report just real quick. This is an example of how big these tunnels are. These are Humvees that are, I mean, these are huge military vehicles, and look at the headroom that they have to possibly have a bigger vehicle go in there. So we have to realize the significance of how big these tunnels are. And the question is, how long have they been there? I mean, they're the furthest south that these tunnels have been. So were these the first ones that they've built? I haven't been able to read reports about that, but just the significance of the size. Let's say, okay, they've only had it for a year, 2 years. Think just in the last 2 years, how big of an operation they could have had to bring weapons into, rockets, et cetera, stuff, get people in and out of. And then think about even during this entire war that they've had up until literally this last week, they've been able to operate these tunnels. You wonder why they're not able to find some of the hostages. You wonder why they're not able to find some of the leaders of Hamas. You wonder how they're able to get supplies. Okay, we know they're taking humanitarian aid, but how are they getting the weapons, et cetera, stuff like this? Like, now all these questions are start to add up. And people can have their concerns and their questions about Netanyahu and his administration, but
if it weren't for his administration allowing the military to even do what it's doing now with even some of the handcuffs that are there, because you take a step back, the general leading this fight right now for Israel says that Israel should have stopped months ago, that they shouldn't have gone into Rafah, that oh, Hamas isn't going to come back and attack them. So this is the mind frame that Netanyahu's having to deal with. If even one of his top generals, and this is very publicly known, he's come out very publicly and said this thing. He's like, you have two different voices in Israel. You have Netanyahu saying we're going to go after them. Even in his speech last week in Congress, we're going to go after Hamas. We're going to end this so they don't come back and fight us. You have the general who's leading at the same time saying, it doesn't really matter. They're not going to hurt us. We can stop now. They want peace. We've hurt them enough. Like let's stop. And so this is the mind frame that Netanyahu's having to deal with. And even those same voices that are saying, oh, let's stop. That's the same exact voices that our administration is listening to.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why they're trying to pressure Netanyahu to do something. And thankfully, Netanyahu has the resolve to understand, hey, I have to worry about my country's sovereignty, my country's safety, and he's been able to withstand the fight now. Now the question is, with their military armament, is it dwindled down? Can they continue to withstand this? How long? That's going to be the question of concern. And they're able to right now. They're shifting manufacturing away from international imports into manufacturing weapons and things within themselves. But then there's the sourcing question, logistic questions of can they get the materials they need to build the weapons to protect themselves. So there's a lot at stake here, and a lot of things that can happen. And even in our American history, speaking of the winter at Valley Forge with George Washington, it was a point in the war where America almost lost the Revolutionary War, but because of a change in the quartermaster or the logistics operations within the American military, that's how they were able to overcome, and that's what shifted a lot of the problems that were in existence for the American military to where now they're able to get supplies, get food, get clothing, weapons, et cetera, stuff like that. And I bring up that example because that's going to be something for Israel in the days ahead.
Yeah. Okay. So let's Zach, if you also find a map of Rafah and the Philadelphia corridor, because I want to talk about that for a second. And he made a good point there because our administration, American, others were just saying, don't go into Rafah. There's nothing big there. And obviously they found that's the hub of Hamas and what's going on in that situation. So as well as what we call the Philadelphia corridor. And what that is, it's right outside the southern part of Gaza. And it's a little corridor where it's a border crossing between Egypt and Israel. I mean, Gaza is obviously part of Israel, but it's right there. And so this is where the weapons, he just showed you a picture of the tunnels. Those tunnels also went into or underneath Israeli villages. So this is how serious this thing was. And whether Israel knew about it or not, we don't know, but that was sitting there. So we need to see a map here of what I'm talking about, because this is part of the ceasefire negotiation that Netanyahu is bringing about, because he wants to have a security force in the Philadelphia corridor, because if we don't stop the weapons moving in, as well as terrorists coming from Egypt into Gaza, then what you're going to repeat this cycle over and over again. So this is the process that we're having. So we need to pray right now that wisdom would prevail, that God would give wisdom. I remember I was reading in Deuteronomy this morning, where Moses told the people, choose leaders that are wise and full of understanding. And that's what we need right now. We need people that are wise, full of understanding. Understanding is more than just wisdom. Understanding is knowing, evaluating the situation, what's going on, and what needs to happen in the days ahead. So this is kind of where we are right now, where we have got to have wisdom in the situation. So Netanyahu has put this on the table. Now they're calling it a stall tactic. Many of the left, Lapid, and all the different people in Israel are calling it a stall tactic for the ceasefire. But the fact is, it's brilliant, because you do not want the access point there. And it's just a small corridor. We're talking a couple football fields wide, I think, if I remember right, the size of it. So that's what we're dealing with. We want to pray that God gives them wisdom in that area. to deal with that. As we speak right now, I got a flash here on my news thing that Biden is about to have a hold of me in the Situation Room over the Iran threat. So the Situation Room is where all his political and military advisors are, and they're going to have a discussion on what to do. This again, my battle is that it's reactive, not proactive. I believe we should be proactive, and I'm going to be honest with you. This is my opinion. If we had a Trump in office or a Bush in office or somebody like that, you would not be seeing Iran threatened this way, because they would know the retaliation would be so severe that they would withhold. I want to say this on the Islamic mindset. The Islamic mindset always is a fear. And if they fear retaliation, they will not act. It's the only thing that they understand. Is that one man that I talked to, a Muslim, who he became a Christian, but he was part of the negotiation during the Iraq War. And he was trying to tell the Americans that democracy and trying to plant democracy is not going to work. It's an eye for an eye. It's a cultural thing. And we don't understand that in America. We just think, hey, if we offer you this, you're going to act right. And that's just not how it works in that arena. So right now, we need a strong voice. That's why the prophetic that Cindy Jacobs and others have given is that we need a wartime president coming into office. And we are at a point right now that we have got to see what is happening here. Now, will we survive if they go to war and we get the bad president, wrong president? Yes, we'll survive. But the fact is that that is not the Lord's perfect will. We're talking back to Daniel 7:25, which is the enemy's trying to change timelines and to change laws in order to bring about this destruction. Did you find anything? Okay, you can find a good one. Well, just know this. If you look at the southern part of Gaza, you will see that this corridor there, you'll see a spot. It's just a border crossing. And they want to put security forces there and keep them there permanently. I wouldn't want to work that one. That's for sure. It can't be an easy. Yeah, that'll do. That map right there will do. Let's throw that up there. If you can see that map there on the pink part, I think it is. If you'll see that, that's that corridor right there, and that Netanyahu wants to make sure we have security forces there to protect that area, as well as that's where all the tunnels were going. So, I've always wondered, everybody always wondered, well, how were they getting all these weapons in? How were they getting all this materials in? Was it coming through the ocean, whatever? No. Well, now we know it was coming through these tunnels. And I want to say this, with all the people that were attacking Netanyahu, he's been right, totally right on this issue. And that's not always accounted for, but he has been accurate. He knows this. He knows what's going on. And so I think they're fighting the right fight right now. You want to add anything to that,
Yeah,
Zach?
just a point on this map. I want to point out here, this is from The Guardian, so it's an incredible source. This is an older map, but it shows here there's dots here, and I think you can kind of see them on the bottom corner of where this pink area is. But even going up in this here, the Gaza Strip, or what is Gaza in Israel, you can see this other smaller map here where my mouse cursor is. Israel is right there on the east of it. So where you see these dots, those are border crossings.
Mm-hmm.
So that's where these tunnels are going into, and that's what they're finding. And that's why it's so crucial for Israel to secure this area and these borders here with themselves and with Egypt, because this is how things are flowing in. This is how these attacks were able to occur, because these borders weren't secure. And this, look, even Netanyahu has to ask the questions over the past year since Hamas has taken over. Why did we allow this? Why did we not do this? And obviously now is an opportune time for him to be able to take control of these areas, and he's doing it so that it doesn't happen again. And hopefully Israel can learn his lesson of let's not make sure this doesn't happen again in the future. And the real point is for generations to come, as you take land little by little, but our future generations going to have this same mindset that Netanyahu has, to understand why that they need to secure these borders, why they need to be the ones controlling what inflows and outflows into these borders, into
this region, if they're going to continue to have Hamas be in control right now. Because one thing that's not being discussed is, these secularists, these modernist organizations that are trying to step forward now and lead Gaza after the war, they're still infiltrated by Hamas. They're still infiltrated by the Muslim Brotherhood, to put it exactly, in how they're going to lead. So they have middle of the road people for the public world to see, but behind closed doors, those people are nothing more than the same cloak of what has been in the past. It's just a different form now. And so hopefully Israel and the world can see this and understand this. There are those within Israel who do understand this. The prayer is that hopefully they have a voice in the days ahead, and that younger generations understand this as well, so that they can pass this knowledge on from generation to generation and not be stuck in this mindset of what happened to those border towns on October 7th, of thinking that this mindset is a peaceful one when it's not.
Okay. There's some comments, Eric, that they're not having a hard time hearing Zach's mic. Okay, you got that. Okay. Remind ourselves here that our watchman call, Isaiah 62:6, on your walls, O Jerusalem, I have appointed watchmen all day and night. They have never kept silent. And they who remind the Lord, take no rest for yourselves and give no rest until he establishes and makes Jerusalem a praise in all the earth. That is what we're doing here. That's what we're making sure you're a part of, that we are those watchmen on the wall. So that's the Israel piece right here today. This is the dire straits that they're in. Again, we're going to be focusing this Friday night. If you want to, you can follow us. We're going to have Apostle Natasha Gerbich from South Africa, and we're going to be dealing with how to pray in principalities, how to deal with those issues, especially with this battle that's going on. And so you can catch that on our live streams. That'll be Friday night at 6:30, starting then Saturday morning at 10:30 Central Time. If you want to catch that with us, we feel like it's an important time to be doing that. So just keep watching and praying in this hour. Keep connected in the spirit. There's some great news sources out there. If you want to just follow Times of Israel, YNet News, Jerusalem Post is very liberal, but you can catch them a little bit. There's some, the JNS one he talked about is probably a good website as well.
Yeah.
So I think those are good ones. We're going to pivot now. Let's deal with domestic issues here in Praying for America. Let's focus on that. As you're watching the news, the markets are crashing worldwide based on America's economic forecast that just came out. Unemployment rose. Shock, shock, shock. The economy is crashing. Shock, shock, shock. This is something that they're playing. If you listen to President Trump, he put a statement out about back in 2020. He said, if I'm not elected, you're going to watch the markets crash under the Biden-Harris economic system. And so we're seeing it. My son from Japan called this morning. Maybe y'all follow him on Fridays, Jacob. And they had suspended the Japanese stock market this morning, today, because it was crashing so drastically. Since 1987 have they seen this level of drop. And so it's chaos in Japan right now in the world markets. And you got to ask yourself why just because a little bad forecast from America that our unemployment's up and the economy's down, et cetera, why would that shock the world? Well, you got to think this is a political picture too, and this is why we're praying for the right president and the right administration to come in office. Because here's what the world looks at. This is my take, but I think you can measure this out. They hear the news because the news of America is based on the economics of the Biden administration, and they're seeing this downturn. They're seeing higher taxes, high inflation, recession coming. They're seeing all these different things. And then you look at the polls, and Harris is pretty much dead even with Trump. The World Economic System said, look at this woman who with Biden has already proven they're going to drive the economy down. And the American people are not alert enough to stop it by reelecting them. Then we have to prepare ourselves for an economic downturn because of that administration. And so that's why, again, we're praying for stability and peace. Now, these things must happen for Christ to come. I hear those voices out there. I get that cessationists say that, et cetera. The fact is, we're supposed to pray that our governments keep us at peace and walk in peace. And we don't want anything premature. And we are getting prophetic that this is premature, that God does not, this is not one of God's plans. I remind you all the time, I've said this many times, when Chuck Pierce prophesied that Obama would be the president the first time, and people got mad at him for that. And he said, look, I'm not saying this is the will of the Lord. I'm just telling you what the Lord said is going to happen. And so we have to remind ourselves there's a difference, and that's that whole thing about timelines moving, et cetera. The enemy can do that. And what we're seeing right now, the enemy's trying to move and cause a world collapse, which then will push in a new anti-Christ spirit government into the earth that will come up with the answers for all these problems that we're having. And we have the answers. It's found in the Word of God, and it's found in our faith. That's where the Word of God. You want to speak to the economic issues, Zach, if you will?
Yeah, what we're seeing is in the natural. Obviously, somebody put in the comments here. The biggest crash since 1987. What we know so far is this 12% stock market crash, which is very huge. And the reason it's somewhat scary is because Japan is a leading market, so they're ahead of us as far as the time goes in the day. So if they're making a decision, it's because of what happened last Thursday, with the jobs report. And what we saw with the jobs report is the lack of new jobs being created. And the reason this is so significant is because one, summer's usually a time where jobs, especially right now, people are settling in, school's about to start, people are starting new jobs right now, and you're not seeing that. And what that means, and if you're understanding, you're following what the numbers have been saying for the past several years with this administration, is that they're not able to hide the fact that there are not jobs being created domestically. There's been so many government jobs, and a lot of these jobs that have been created are government jobs. So that due to high taxes, that's a big concern there. But now they can no longer hide the fact that the private sector is not being able to create jobs. And unfortunately, what a lot of the news reports don't tell you is the revisions that are made month after month to tick down the actual jobs reports numbers. And I've been saying it for some time. A lot of economists that I agree with, that I disagree with, they're saying, look, these numbers are being fudged. And so now it's getting to a point, this is how bad it is. It's getting to a point where they can't fudge the numbers anymore. They've fudged the numbers so bad that now the unintended consequence is the world markets are now having to shift. And a lot of people, even those who aren't prophetic, have positioned themselves for this moment even before President Trump was in office. And I'll just say this is, look, we can elect President Trump, and even when President Trump was in office, the economy got better for the short term, but these problems that are causing our economy to go in a downward spiral right now, they still exist. And even if President Trump were to come in office, they're still going to exist. So this is a long-term problem that the world, one, is going to have to deal with, but then two, America more specifically is going to have to deal with. And hopefully we as Americans can understand that. And I remember correctly, Chris Reed had a word. There's going to need to be a Margaret Thatcher type of spirit rise up in this season. And what was Margaret Thatcher? She was someone who made tough choices that for the short term seemed hard, seemed like the wrong decisions, but in the long term, it set not only Britain and the UK and its colonies up for success in the short term, but in the long term as well. And they've obviously done their own things after the fact, but it was because of those decisions, those hard decisions that were made then. And look at Argentina right now. Mele's making decisions that just are shocking to, those that be in power, where he's creating more. Speak about just the housing market, getting rid of rent control and supply restrictions, and what's happening to the Argentinian rent markets is they're plummeting for the better for the consumer, so that people can actually afford housing. More housing is being built, and that's the foundation of the economy. So if you have lower housing costs, now money can go towards extra things like food, cars, etc., transportation. So it's a benefit. And I heard one economist talk about it this weekend. He said he said, look, this is the lesson the world should be paying attention to, but unfortunately they're not going to learn from it. And it's amazing what happens when you allow liberty to, and this is in a good sense of how liberty can be a good thing, to allow people to make the choices that they can make and are willing to make. But when you have unintended consequences, which is like what we're seeing here in America from bad decisions economically and financially, now we're getting what we're getting. And just know this is that it's also a time of opportunity. I talk about the negative, but the positive is if you've positioned yourself properly, you're out of debt or have very little debt, you're in a position to now take advantage where others are going to be fearful and want to hold back. And there's going to be more opportunities, whether it be in creating a business or buying assets or things of that nature. To a degree, like there's an opportunity out there. Just because the market's going in the opposite direction, and the media is pushing fear, is there's still a positive. And this is the time where, look at Israel as they took the land. The people who are in those lands, they became fearful because of the fear of the Lord. And so if we have the fear of the Lord on our side, we can walk in that place of peace with the Lord and take ground in the season ahead.
Okay, so this I just pulled up a live report here. The Dow Jones has dropped 900 points. Nasdaq's cratered 3%. Throw that up there on the Eric, that my website there, CNBC here, CNBC. I'm sorry. So it's dropped 900 points already. Nasdaq's cratered 3%. Global market live updates. So this fell sharply Monday as this sell-off was centered around the U.S. recession fears. The Dow Jones is, like I said, dropped 901. On it goes. And the fear is we're going to recession, and the disappointing jobs forecast. Again, this also has to tie with our debt. Mark Nuttall talked about that. We played some of that stuff a couple of weeks ago about this issue. So here you're seeing this battle go on where the market is just nosediving right now. We can't ignore what's happening here in this situation. So it is what we warned yesterday. I felt led just to tell the people yesterday that we're going to have this economic downturn. I didn't expect it to happen the next day, but we are here. Interest rates is a challenge. There's a word that the Federal Reserve is going to drop the interest rates, but the world markets have already said they're not dropping interest rates, so they're going to keep them the same. So you got a little battle going on there. But the numbers are high, and when we look at these numbers, I think we can't ignore that this is a moment in time. We got to pray. Now, what is the answer to this problem? I think that's the ultimate. And that's some of the comments. What do we do here? I think the answer is we must stay in the will of God. And I shared that yesterday. I shared the word Rick Joyner had, which is October's coming. And there's no more important time to be in the will of God. Please, if you're listening to our Wednesday night services on the Ministry of Reconciliation, I talk about Romans chapter 12, about being the good, acceptable, and perfect will of God. That means your life is a living sacrifice. You cannot make decisions on personal gain. You can't make decisions on personal comfort. You have to make decisions on what God has said. I've been saying this for a couple of years now. When the Lord gave me the dreams about the economy going down, that cash was king, be liquid, try to get out as much debt as you can get, where you can access to your resources, so that in time of crisis, you can, one, take care of yourself and those that you love, your friends, your family, your church ministries, etc. But also, I heard this, and it hasn't come to pass yet fully, but I heard pennies on the dollar, which means there's going to be a great time for investment come as this stuff starts happening. So prepare yourself. Ask God to say, God, Lord, ask the Lord, say, Lord, where can I get the pennies on the dollar? Where can I buy purchases that's going to advance the kingdom of God for purposes of my family, for my ministry, whatever God's called me to, and that I can begin to have these investments. And I believe that whole thing is being liquid. Liquid means, Zach's an MBA guy here, but liquid to me means you can get your hands on it. It's something you can touch. And if you put stuff in stocks and stuff, you got to sell off. You got to go through the whole process. You can't grab it immediately. If it's tied up in a market that has time frames on it, you can't get to it. But this way you can get to it. So that's kind of our answer in the natural. And stay away from fear. Because in the Basilisk spirit battle, one of the things that Bob Jones gave a warning about, but also I think it's a great warning for all of us. It's in Job, where it says the thing that you fear will come upon you. And I believe that's one of the battlegrounds that we have. If you walk in fear, the very thing that you'll fear will come upon your life and upon your home. And we can't do that. We have to put our faith in the Lord, and say, God, you're telling me what to do, what to invest in, where to put my resources in, and then also prepare for others. If you're only thinking about your house and nobody else, you're missing the purpose of preparation. We've got to think about how we can help people. We had our business meeting recently in our ministry, and I told the people, God's positioned us well, because I said, I feel like we're going to need to be positioned well, because we're going to need to help people. We're going to need to help many things that are going on, because I can see what's happening. I can see what's coming. So speak to that, Zach, a little bit.
Yeah, just on the natural
Standpoint of view, we're not telling you what to invest in, but if you want to learn, just go look up what the term liquid means. And if you have a financial advisor, go talk to him, because we're legally not allowed to
Right.
suggest what what to invest in. So please don't ask. There's a whole licensing requirements behind that, and thank God that there is. That way, a lot of people can't be giving out advice, and those who do give out advice freely, I would highly question what they're saying. But what we're getting prophetically is be liquid right now in this season because of the ebbs and flows of the market. And then also on a biblical standpoint is Deuteronomy 8:18. The Lord gives us power to create wealth. And so if you're wondering what to do with your money, just that's where you spend time in the Lord. And the a way to look now is liquid. How do you be liquid? What are some things that you can be liquid in that? And this is what a financial advisor will tell you, a good one will tell you, is do invest in something that you understand. Don't get out in something that you don't understand. If you don't understand it, and it may be awkward, it may be weird to everybody else, but if it makes sense to you and you understand the whole market and the industry, then that might be something to look into. But obviously, speak to a professional, understand, do some research yourself. And so that then you can go with that peace that the Lord's given you and making sure you understand that, because history has told us when somebody just gives a prophetic word sometimes and they say invest in this, if they don't have that somewhat of a natural understanding of what it is and how to invest in it, and maybe that may be true, the investment may be good, but it's investing is about timing. And right now is a time to be in those things that are liquid, not in other assets right now. And that's what even the big dogs are doing, is a lot of them are pulling out of the market. They have cash sitting in the bank or just cash sitting in something because they'd rather lose their money due to inflation rather than lose it off a 12% one day loss. So that's kind of the things on the market to mix the natural with the spiritual there, of understanding where we're in. And if you have that place of peace with the Lord, he'll he'll give you the right decisions and steps to take as you steward what is his. Because a lot of times we get confused and thinking that our money is ours and we're the ones who control it. We're the ones who made this decision to gain it. Is, look, the Lord has given you the power to create the wealth that you have, but then also we're stewards of the resources the Lord has given us. And as we go from 5, 10, 15 growing on in the story of the parable of the talents, is we have to learn how to steward the resources we have at the level we're at in order to go to the next level. And so if we can be faithful with little, he can be faithful with much. And so just remember that and be at that place of peace here in the season ahead.
Okay. Thank you, Zach. And we're going to close this out today. Thank you for praying with us and watching us here on the Pipeline Report. We're going to keep coming back to you over and over again in this season. I think that's a real good word of counsel that he just gave about investments. I think we all kind of got burned in the past of some prophetic voices that were not accurate concerning the economic realm and told you what to do. I was prayed at that at one time. And you remember the Y2K, everything's going to collapse, economy's going down, da, da, da. And there was a lot of prophetic voices saying that. And I remember Rick Joyner, fortunately, was a more stable voice during that time. And he said, it's going to be a nothing burger. Nothing's going to happen. We're going to be fine. Well, it was a big battle in the prophetic community because you have one community saying everything's going under and one prophetic group saying, no, nothing's going to happen. And that's where revelation and natural knowledge need to fit together. And fortunately, Rick was right, and nothing did happen. And it was a lot of people made a lot of investments and wasted a lot of money that they didn't need to waste. And although I think it was a forerunner, kind of a preparation to say, well, would you do in that situation? Start us thinking and processing what we would do in a crisis that way. I think Pastor Regis Richards spoke for us yesterday, and one of the things he saw a real attack on the electric grid. And I think that's something you need to put into your process and think about. For us who live in Louisiana with 98 degrees and 105% humidity, yeah, we'll lose comfort. I get that. But use some wisdom in that area. What you should do to prepare for yourself and those around you, how you could help people. Maybe you could have a generator to store food for other people as well as yourself. So they don't have their spoilage and stuff like that. It's, again, think community, Think wider than yourself. Think that. And I think that God will give you more wisdom, and he'll give you more insight, because if he thinks, okay, if I tell this person this is going to happen, or these people, this ministry, then they have a heart to help other people. I can entrust them with revelation, because they're not just thinking about themselves. That's the kingdom of God mentality. That's kind of where we are in our hearts in that. So thanks for joining us. Now, tomorrow, we're changing our formats on Tuesday on our on our ministry. Do we know, Zach, if we're going to be on
Christian Center. We'll be on Christian.
We'll be on Christian Center tomorrow. All our sites there. We're going to focus now until the election on praying for each state in the nation. So we're going to pray for 50 states, and each Tuesday we're going to take some of the states and we're going to pray for them. Pray for wisdom in those states, and then we're also going to pray for the election as it's coming forward here. So that's what Tuesdays are going to be at noon Central Time. So that's a shift starting tomorrow, and we'll carry that at least all the way through the. Do you want to say anything? Okay, all the way through the election. So that's kind of where our focus is on that. We're going to readjust the pipeline report as well as we get closer to the election, because I think you're going to need more intel, more information on what to do. Wednesday night, I'll be just doing live stream only for our Wednesday night Ministry of Reconciliation. And then Friday night, Natasha Gerbich, Arrow Gate Ministry from South Africa, will be with us and really equipping us on how to pray in this dark season, how to deal with the principalities, the powers that are attacking our nations, and how to do it properly. We don't want to have any needless casualties of war. I think sometimes we're scared to deal with this issue because it's so serious. But the fact is, in the midst of that, we need wisdom on how to deal with that. So thank you for partnering with us. Don't forget to listen to our podcast as well. I'm giving updates, especially this week. I gave today on the 9th of Av, on the month of Av, but then this rest of the week, I'll probably focus on the dire straits and what is coming and how we can pray for Israel and pray for our nations in this hour. Such a very, very important time in the Spirit. So, Father, I thank you. Bless the viewer today. Thank you for this time to give equipment and wisdom and information to the house of God, Lord, to walk through this difficult season. God bless you. We'll see you tomorrow at 12 noon.